Away from water is Ariel Waldman. Ariel is the founder of spacehack.org. She calls herself a procrastinator or self-professed instigator. Procrastinator and instigator. We've known Ariel for a long time, and she really is at the forefront of a lot of things in the scientific space, and we're looking forward to her presentation.
Thank you. I'm incredibly excited to be here with you all and have like our little intimate chat. I have a very long history with VML. I technically started going into VML, although without a paycheck, in 1999. So it's been a really long journey, and I was there for about 8 years, and I just love it. VML very much sort of raised me as a kid, I feel. But I wanted to start with this image here. I just love it so much. This is this great image that was taken by Voyager 1, which is one of my favorite spacecrafts that's going to be out of reaches of our solar system and sort of beyond. And if you can see the pale blue speck of a pixel there, that's Earth as seen from about 4 billion miles away. So that's where I am. That's where all of us are. And I just love this image so much because it really reminds us of how much space exploration often changes our view of ourselves and really our place in the universe. But a lot of my work really focuses on changing how we view space exploration. And so a lot of what I focus on is sort of like hacking space exploration and changing it. But when I'm talking about hacking space exploration, a lot of what I'm really talking about is hacking space observation. Our relationship with space exploration is often something where we're viewing astronauts and government agencies sort of exploring space on behalf of us, but we ourselves aren't really doing much. We're kind of just watching them. So this kind of actually relates to my personal story and how I went from VML to space. Not literally, but working in space, maybe one day space. But in 2008, about a year after I had left VML because I wanted to move to San Francisco, I was watching this great documentary called When We Left Earth. It was on the Discovery Channel, and it was about NASA during the 1950s and 1960s and how they figured out how to get a man into space. And I found this documentary so incredibly inspirational, and I was just sitting at home watching this that I kind of told a friend that I would love to work for NASA, but I had no idea if they needed someone like me. I had been working at VML for a number of years. My degree is originally in graphic design. I have no background really in science. I didn't know a lot about space exploration, but I was just like, oh, it looks like it'd be so awesome to work at NASA. I wish I could. And so I randomly sent someone at NASA who I had never met before an email. And I sent them an email saying that I was a huge fan of everything that they were doing, and if they ever needed someone like me, I was around, or a volunteer, or anything like that. And it was this incredibly geeky fangirl moment, and I didn't really ever expect to hear back from that email. I assumed they would sort of just shuffle it away. But serendipitously, someone actually did reply to that email, and they had just that day created a job description for someone like me. We're looking for someone who had a background in design, had a background in marketing, was connected to startups in San Francisco, etc. And so serendipitously, from that email that I had sent them, I got a job at NASA, and it completely changed my life. And so this is a picture of me at NASA in 2008. As you can see, people at NASA are not as fashion forward as ad agencies, but I'm smiling in this picture, but in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe I'm here. This is so awesome. I was like about to lose it because I was so excited. Because I had never really aimed to work at NASA, and I never really expected to work at NASA, so it was just a different experience for sure. And so I worked for this great program at NASA called CoLab. And CoLab was a program that tried to connect communities inside and outside NASA to collaborate. And so it was really about getting NASA to open up different types of their data, getting amateur astronomers to collaborate with the astronomers at NASA, etc. And so this is me with a cube satellite, which is a small satellite, and working at NASA was just incredibly inspiring. Much like working at VML, I kind of felt like I was getting paid to go to school. It was really just great. I got to learn from scientists about dark matter and robots and satellites all the time, and it was just amazing. But one of the most important things I actually ended up learning at NASA was that I didn't need to really work at NASA at all to explore space, and so I left. I realized that there's actually a lot of things that you can do to explore space and to contribute to scientific discovery without actually needing to work at NASA. So that was kind of one of the most important lessons I learned, was that I didn't actually need to work at NASA in the first place to do a bunch of awesome, cool space stuff. And so this sort of changed me, because it really, as this says, like, doing something changes how you see it. So actually doing science and doing space exploration actively changes your relationship with it from something of observation to something you can actively participate in and contribute to. And this was something that I thought wasn't possible, and it actually is. So hacking space exploration, though, goes sort of one step beyond sort of Instructables, how to make super shiny space leggings. It's not exactly that, DIY and roots-based. These are very fashionable, but probably not very functional in space, just for a note. So it's one step beyond that. It's more, hacking space exploration is more about saying, you know what, I don't want to wait until NASA gives me a rocket to launch something into space. I want to do something now. I want to do something like this. This isn't Photoshop, this is actually a real image. 11 to 13-year-olds in the UK actually sent their teddy bears into near space on a weather balloon. And so they were actually able to do this without needing anyone's permission, without needing NASA. And they did this because they wanted to test how different materials reacted in near space-like situations. So they sent their teddy bears into space, which is just incredibly adorable. And I just love it. So to me, hacking space exploration and getting involved in it is not just about getting excited and making things. It's really about getting excited and making disruptively accessible things. Things that really disrupt the current state of science and a lot of the closed nature parts of it, and actively make it more accessible for all different types of people to participate in. So following NASA, I spent the next 2 weeks after I left NASA, which was during a horrible time. I left NASA when the economy was dropping and it was impossible to get a job in San Francisco. And so I spent the 2 weeks after I left NASA creating spacehack.org. And spacehack.org is a directory of ways to participate in space exploration. And it's just really simple, and it's just things that people can do with or without a science background. And so how I put together spacehack.org is it's essentially a website, and it logs all these different things that you can do to actively contribute to science in like a couple of paragraphs. Because a lot of this stuff is out there, but it's very deep in government websites, or it's very hard to understand, or it assumes that you know every acronym that NASA uses, which is insane. And so it's kind of just very simple. And so the types of things on SpaceHack are things like the Google Lunar X Prize. Google Lunar X Prize is a $30 million competition to build and send a robot to the moon. And this is something that teams around the world are actually doing. And it's without government agencies. And there's a number of teams from around the world who are going to be launching robots to the moon within the next couple of years, which is going to be so huge. I actually get sad a little bit that this hasn't been promoted more, because I know that the first time someone's able to actually land a robot on the moon without a government agency is going to be really cool. And I think it also kind of outlines how exciting of a time it is to be in space exploration. Because if you go back to Apollo 11 and landing on the moon, which was in 1969, 7 years before that, 1962, America crash landed its first robot on the moon. Essentially, the first American robot to touch the moon failed and completely crashed into it in 1962. So in 7 years, we were able to go from not even being able to successfully land a robot on the moon to being able to successfully land a man on the moon. And within the next couple of years, you're going to have people from around the world landing robots on the moon. So it's kind of exciting to think about where that could go maybe in a decade or so. Other projects that I really love that are on Space Hack are ones like Galaxy Zoo. Galaxy Zoo is actually an online interface in which anyone can discover a new galaxy that no one has discovered before. And it's this great little website. You can sign up in like 2 minutes, and it just asks you some very basic questions. Like, are you looking at an elliptical feature or a spiral feature? Kind of basic stuff. And the thing that's really great about it is that it doesn't use data monkeys, so to speak. So the work that you do on Galaxy Zoo actually gets credited to you. You're not doing work for some scientist who's going to take credit for your work. If you discover a galaxy on Galaxy Zoo, your name goes on that scientific paper. So it's a pretty cool thing to do to say you've discovered an entire galaxy that no one else has. This actually happened in the case of the green Peas galaxies. These little green dots that you can see here are an entirely new form of galaxy that was discovered by people using Galaxy Zoo. And this is because Galaxy Zoo not only gives you that pretty picture of a galaxy, but they allow you to dig into the data behind it. And so some people saw these green Peas galaxies and weren't really sure what they were and started investigating it further and started collaborating with people who both were scientists and non-scientists on forums. And before they do it, they had discovered an entirely new type of galaxy. And all of this actually leads to also better machine learning, so hopefully one day machines can get better at discovering galaxies too. But in the meantime, all of us can discover new galaxies, which is exciting. Another really cool thing to search for are exoplanets, which are just essentially extrasolar planets, or planets that are around other stars. And there's about 160 billion of them out there, so there's in our galaxy alone. So there's a lot out there to discover, and so far we've discovered somewhere around 800 or so of them, so not a lot out of the 160 billion. And the way in which we're discovering these exoplanets using NASA's Kepler telescope is actually really interesting to me. What NASA's Kepler telescope does is it actually looks at starlight very, very closely. And it looks at the starlight so closely, and is able to tell if there's any dips in brightness in the starlight. And if it witnesses a dip in brightness in the starlight, it might actually be witnessing an exoplanet transiting in front of its star. And so if an Earth-sized planet transits in front of its star, the brightness might only dip down by 1/10,000th or so, very small amount. But NASA's Kepler telescope can actually record this and tell you if you're looking at an exoplanet. Now, NASA has some really great algorithms for detecting all these little dips in brightness in the light curve. But the reality is that humans are still better at pattern recognition than machines are. So there's a great project like Galaxy Zoo called Planet Hunters, where you can actually look at this open light curve data from Kepler and discover new exoplanets, which is really exciting. Another thing that you could discover just in a couple of minutes or so. And people through Planet Hunters have discovered exoplanets that would otherwise be left behind by NASA's Kepler telescope. So it's kind of an exciting thing to be able to do. So these projects on Space Hack that are there are really sort of around this concept that open doesn't necessarily mean accessible. People talk a lot about making things open source and opening up data and open science, and all of that's really great, but to me that only solves half of the problem. By not actually doing anything interesting with that data, you're not really making it accessible. If you think back to the Galaxy Zoo project, all of that data was already open and out there for anyone to use, but it wasn't until someone actually built an interface to it that it allowed hundreds of thousands of people to try and be using it to discover galaxies. And you do have hundreds of thousands of people using Galaxy Zoo and Planet Hunters to try and discover new things. And so this is something that I often talk about. This is me at 2010, I'm not sure, I can't remember. And I was just talking about how, I think it was 2010, how I was so frustrated that there is so much open science data out there, but no one's actually doing anything with it. And so, sitting in the audience and hearing me be frustrated about this was a friend of mine, Jeremy Keys, and he saw me speak about this and was like, well, let's actually do something about that. And so, out of sort of that conversation came an event called Science Hack Day. And Science Hack Day is a 48-hour event in which scientists, designers, developers, and all sorts of people get into the same physical space to see what they can rapidly prototype with science in 24 consecutive hours. It's very rapid fire. The mission of Science Hack Day is really just to get excited and make things with science. And so here's an image of the Science Hack Day in San Francisco that I organized in 2011. People can make silly things and people can make serious things. We don't really care. We leave it very open-ended. And as I'm sure you all know, since you all sort of work in this area and keep up to date with new things happening in the community, hackathons are something that are very ubiquitous nowadays. But to me, a lot of hackathons actually look something like this. They can be very exploitive, and they focus so much on like the output and like what startups were created as a result of the hack day, and how what they made at the hack day changed the world, and all this very serious stuff. But to me, that's not really the beauty of hackathons and hacking. To me, it's really about lowering the barrier to entry to have people play with stuff that they've never played with, both on the science side and not on the science side. So getting people without formal science backgrounds to play with scientific data, and getting scientists to also play with new things as well. And so Science Hack Day over the last couple of years, since our very small beginnings at SXSWi 2 years ago, we were in Chicago last year at the Adler Planetarium, where we got to hack a planetarium overnight. That was a lot of fun and really awesome. Also last year I got to travel to Kenya, and we had a science hack day there, and people were making robots and just so much awesome stuff, which was great. And so a lot more information about Science Hack Day in general is at sciencehackday.com. And Science Hack Day actually isn't an organization, so I don't work for Science Hack Day. No one owns Science Hack Day. It is just an open thing that anyone can do. There are open instructions for how you can organize a Science Hack Day in your city at the website. We were also lucky enough this year to receive a very small grant from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. Gordon Moore, who famously came up with Moore's Law, and we got this small grant that's going to allow us to send people from around the world to attend the Science Hack Day in San Francisco, and then sort of bring it back to their own cities, which is fun. So, the types of things that are created at Science Hack Days, which I love to talk about, just because they're so silly, and yeah, they don't always mean something. What you're looking at here is essentially someone wanted to create a typeface in which all of the letters of the typeface had equal wind drag. I do not know why. But so what you're actually looking at here is a makeshift wind tunnel that someone hacked together, and they measured the wind drag of each individual letter. And so they created this whole typeface, and so if you want a typeface in which all of the letters have equal wind drag, it looks something like this, and it's just, I don't know, it's great. This was actually created by a particle physicist, so it's just kind of awesome because a particle physicist was playing with typography, and it's just playing with stuff. I have no idea how this is meaningful or how this is going to change the world, but I think it's awesome personally. Another thing that I loved was this hack, which is called the Dianacry. And the Dianacry is essentially a completely edible cocktail of extracted strawberry DNA. And yeah, it tastes disgusting. You can extract DNA fairly simply using materials, but sometimes you have to use materials that aren't edible, so someone wanted to extract strawberry DNA using completely edible materials. If you want to figure out how to do this and impress your friends, there is a recipe up on Instructables somewhere. You can impress people at SXSWi, I'm sure we've got the right nerd crowd right here. So, you know, there's another hack that was just kind of awesome and fun. Another hack that I thought was interesting, going back to particle physics, was essentially particle physicists often look at pictures like these. This is like a visualization of subatomic particle collision. And I'm not a particle physicist, so I can't explain everything in this image to you, but the 4 green lines and the 4 red towers in this represent 4 high-energy electrons. But a group of hackers at a Science Hack Day wanted to know, what if instead of actually seeing a visualization of what a subatomic particle collision looks like, what if we could actually hear what one sounds like? And so they created this great hack called the particle wind chime. And the particle wind chime essentially takes subatomic particle collision data and maps it to sounds. So if you can imagine what a subatomic particle collision might sound like, anything in your head, whatever you can imagine, that's sort of what they were trying to do, and they mapped it to all different types of sounds to see if they could get different types of information about it. The thing that I find actually most interesting about this hack was actually that it's now sort of being looked into as a type of augmented diagnostic tool for accelerator laboratories. So if you can imagine being at an accelerator laboratory like the Large Hadron Collider, which would be really, really cool. I hope to go there someday. But you can imagine you're surrounded by all these screens telling you how the accelerator is doing, but in addition to all these screens, you could actually also get used to how the accelerator sounds and get used to hearing if something sounds a bit off. And so that's actually what's being looked into now, which is kind of cool. Another interesting hack that came out of Science Hack Day was essentially someone wanted to hack what it was like to experience synesthesia. And synesthesia is essentially something where the wires between your different senses get crossed. So some people with synesthesia will report associating certain colors with certain letters, or if they hear a loud sound, they might actually visually see a ripple across their vision. There's actually a lot of different types of synesthesia. So a group of hackers wanted to simulate what it was like to experience synesthesia. And so they created something that's really incredibly creepy called synesthesia.
Oh, no.
This is an incredibly creepy hack called synesthesia that simulates synesthesia. And so how they did this was they took all these vibrating speakers and they attached it to someone's face. And because it was a hack day and they only had 24 hours or so to put this together, they claimed that the only open pattern for a mask that they could find was one for a GIMP mask. That's what they told me. So they stayed up all night and sewed together this GIMP mask and put all these vibrating speakers inside of it. And then they wired it all up to an Arduino and a webcam. And so as someone navigates different parts of the room, and different parts of the room are lighter or darker, different parts of their face will start vibrating. So in this sense, you can really begin to feel sight, which is kind of cool. My favorite one is, this is my all-time favorite story from the Science Hack Day, is someone wanted to create a beard detector. Essentially, they wanted a device to tell him if he needed to shave or not. You could hold it up to his face and it would say, you need to shave or something. And so what he did is he took a USB microscope and he held this USB microscope up to his face, and it's kind of gross, but he could see all the stubble on his face. And so he wrote some really basic code and used an open computer vision library, and so as a result, he was able to get something like this. And as you can see, it's in the terminal, it's saying, no beard found, no beard found, oh wait, we found a beard, and it draws lines around his stubble, and is able to actually detect his beard. So you may be asking yourself, okay, what does this have to do with science? That's exactly what I was asking myself when I saw this. We don't put any restrictions on people, we just allow people to explore whatever they want to explore. And so when I first saw this, I was like, okay, that's amusing, but I have no idea what it has to do with science. But sitting in the audience and seeing this demoed was upon seeing this, said, wow, that's actually a really genius way for how to detect cosmic rays in a cloud chamber. Which sounds insane until you actually see what cosmic rays in a cloud chamber looks like. And so actually following Science Hack Day, this particle physicist wrote up this entire proposal for how to detect cosmic rays in a cloud chamber using the original code and open computer vision library someone had used to detect if you needed to shave or not. And so this is just really what I love about hack days and hacking. It's really about creating sparks for future ideas and future collaborations and future things that could take place, and really about exploring sort of unknown things and not necessarily knowing where you're going or having a plan, so to speak. So this is just sort of the joy that I love from hacking, and this is why I use this image, because I think it's just really awesome. I think in science there's a lot of stuff that we could be exploring for. We could be exploring for exoplanets or extraterrestrials, but to me it's really sort of this exploration for experimentation that I find so incredibly precious. And so I think we've really found it through hacking science and hacking space exploration. Thank you.
I would ask if there are any questions, but I didn't understand most of that. Are there questions?
You could, yeah, I mean, you could try. I think, you know, one of the lessons from doing hack days is really making sure you never pick a subject that's too narrow. So a lot of people, even the science hack day, people have said, well, why don't we just do a space hack day or a biotechnology hack day? And to me, it's making sure that you have a hack day that is a broad enough of a topic so that you can have different types of people interacting with each other who otherwise wouldn't. Is probably like the biggest lesson. So, you know, I think a lot of brands are doing hackathons now, and I think it's mostly good, but yeah, it's just a fine line walking between sort of doing something around community building versus sort of exploiting people to build something on your API or something like that.
So you mentioned about called Galaxy Zoo. How long could it take you to find a galaxy? It sounds like a very hard thing to do, and so typically, how long does it take a person to explore the website and find one?
So there's not really a time scale. Galaxy Zoo specifically was actually a more interesting project because initially it wasn't set up necessarily for people to discover galaxies. Galaxy Zoo and Planet Hunters and projects like that are often set up so that even if you spend only a little bit of time on it, you're actually still contributing to something. So with Galaxy Zoo, it's actually studying galaxy morphology or how galaxies have formed. And it does that by asking people, you know, is this a spiral galaxy, is this an elliptical galaxy? And so even if you don't discover a new galaxy, the work that you've been doing actually goes to a larger pool of helping people understand how galaxies form, which is pretty cool. So with Galaxy Zoo, what happened was they actually didn't expect that anyone would discover galaxies through that. That wasn't their intention. But they had all this open data that kind of no one had really looked through before. And so people started, kind of unknown to them, people in the forum started talking about, like, well, what's this? What does this mean? And this looks like it has a star spectrum, but it doesn't look like a star, and, you know, other key things. Before they knew it, people started collaborating and collectively trying to figure out what they were looking at these like unidentified objects. And so they sort of stumbled upon the green peas galaxies, and that's how the first one was sort of found. So after that, people realized that they can actually discover some galaxies through this data since no one else has looked at it. So there's not really a time scale. I would say with the planet hunters and exoplanet data, they are actively wanting you to discover new planets that no one has seen before. And that's something where, you know, you could discover it pretty soon, or you could look at it for a ton of time and say, like, I think I found one. So spend 6 months, you will discover a planet and you will be epically awesome forever. It's something where if you spend 2 minutes, you're actively contributing to something. If you spend a little bit more time and collaborate with people using these interfaces, then you might actually be collaborating with people trying to collectively discover an exoplanet or a galaxy. And in those situations, as I mentioned, those people's names actually go on the scientific paper. So you can actually say, here's a scientific paper that I was a co-author on, and I discovered an exoplanet, and I have no background in science, and I almost couldn't even tell you anything about exoplanets in general. So that's really cool.
So what are the first basic steps about setting up a hack day in your town?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things, they're not that hard because they're not, supposed to be professional conferences, so they're kind of meant to be, in a sense, hacked together. At sciencehackday.com, I've actually spent time and written up a full set of instructions for how you could organize one. So that's there. But in general, it's something that you can definitely do while you have a full-time job. You can do it in your spare time. To me, the most important part about it is really doing the outreach and making sure you have completely different types of people attending. And then from there, at Science Hack Days, we have lightning talks, so we try and hold people's hands and make sure that they don't show up blank. A lot of people show up saying, I have no idea what I'm going to do, which we totally encourage, and it's perfectly fine. So we just do a lot of hand-holding around, telling people you don't need to have any hacker skills, you don't need to have a background in science, you just have to want to play with things and figure it out. So a lot of people show up having no idea what they're going to do, and we organize, a few small lightning talks at the beginning about here's some open NASA data you could consider playing with. Here's a molecular biology lab that someone brought from home that you can play with. Just all types of things just to encourage people to explore different areas. And from there, it's just kind of open place-based. The most important thing is provide a lot of food. Science Hack Days are completely free events, and they're organized by volunteers like myself. So no one's getting paid for any of it, and so we just get sponsorship to pay for a weekend's worth of food, so that no one has to go off-site to get stuff, and then that sort of loses their momentum. So we get sponsors to pay for all the food, and it's all free, and people just create stuff, and kind of over the weekend, it's kind of like an intimate little community, and so it's just awesome, and things like the fear detector emerge out, and I think the most stressful and most awesome thing about organizing hack days and Science Hack Day for me is that you just can't predict any of it. When I was organizing my first one in 2010, I was really, I started getting very stressed out because I am very much an organizer and planner type of person. I realized I could plan the most perfect event, and I still, at the end of the day, couldn't control if anyone would actually get along with each other, if they even would want to make anything. So I started losing sleep multiple nights, just being very uncertain about I'm like, oh, what if everyone shows up and no one likes each other? Or what if there's really mean people? And you just can't control it. And nowadays I'm a bit more relaxed about that, and it's actually that's kind of the beauty of it. It's just kind of going with it. Any other questions?
How do you decide who to invite?
Can you speak up, sorry?
Yeah, how do you decide who to invite?
Oh, yeah. So inviting people to hackathons. So what I do, which I personally think works well, is a group of organizers get together. So it's maybe me and a few of my friends. And we say, okay, who can we invite to this event, or who do we know or know of that we know would make this event really awesome? People who either inherently just get the sort of self-organizing nature of these events, or people that we just think are really cool, and also, just the diversity of people. So we put together sort of a core group of people we want to individually send invites to, and this might be a group of 20 to 50 people. And this is also our huge opportunity for making sure that we have enough diversity, not only in gender, but also in different types of science being represented, different types of people from different industries being represented. We send these 20 to 50 people individual invites saying that we would really love for them to attend. And we do that before we open up a public invitation. And so what that does is it really makes sure that you have a core group of people who kind of inherently get it and represent kind of what you think would make the event awesome, and then you open it up to everyone. And to me, this is a really important part about hackathons is if you're doing a hackathon where most of the people have never participated in an event like this and they're all going to be a bit intimidated, which is totally natural, make sure you have a core group of people who do get it, because the best thing that you can do is sort of create like a monkey see, monkey do sort of situation. If inherently a group of people kind of get it, everyone else kind of watches them for a while. We encourage people to eavesdrop, and that's okay if you don't figure out what you want to do for the first several hours. If you don't find a team for the first several hours, totally fine, part of it. And so by having this sort of core group there, just inherently attending and doing nothing else, it kind of just helps make sure of the event. Any other questions? Cool.
We don't like to lose people at VML, and Ariel was a keeper, and I had no idea we lost it at NASA, so it makes me feel better. Thank you for speaking. We have one last speaker. We're gonna break for a few minutes, and then we'll have Matthew Kuman up, who's going to talk about the whole concept of content. So come back in a few minutes, and we'll do that.